Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. Over my entire life, I have had this keen sense of self-analyzation tied to my psyche. And even when I have been in perilous flight, running from some emotion threatening to cripple me or drive me to dark places, my brain had a mind of its own. Christine Beckwith, the one and only Christine Beckwith, is back to talk about finding honor, the journey to the truth, chapter 2. This is chapter 2, Premonitions and Reoccurring Dreams. If you've not listened to our dialogue around chapter 1, I challenge you to listen to that. Chapter 1, A Time for Honor. Christine Beckwith is one in a million, founder of 2020 Vision for Success Coaching, mentor to countless, friend of the Culture Matters podcast, family, really family at this point, clearly, of the Culture Matters podcast, of us. And today we're going to talk about chapter 2. Christine,
Awesome.
what was going through your mind when you were writing this?
Yeah, my gosh. I think I dreamt of writing this book my whole life. I thought if I ever become an author, I'll have a memoir, I'll have some life-ending best lesson book type of thing. And as my life was occurring, good, bad, and ugly, I kept thinking that would be a good chapter in this book, in my mind. And so the problem with us conceptualizing our honesty, our honest places, our honest lessons, is most of the time we're not willing to share them because they're embarrassing, disgraceful, hard, hurtful, PTSD, whatever. There's the whole bucket of shit that we deal with. And so I certainly wasn't ready to talk about my dark spots. In fact, I spent most of my career, pointing everybody's eyes towards my shiny parts, like, look at me. And I didn't understand how I was operating from other people's perspective over the decade prior to writing this. I had done some studying. One revelation was with Charles Horton's sociology, the looking glass theory of 1905, which talks about the theory of not being able to see ourselves, in our own reflection. And it started to open my mind. Obviously, the book opens up, which we talked about in the last episode, of me having a moment of awakening, which comes with you, which is why we're talking about it, because it's, this is ours. And I always want to say this, if people are coming into this podcast and this is the first one they're watching, I'm going to repeat this probably throughout all the episodes. And that is that Jay had no idea. I mean, everybody knows that you're not like this anyways, but you had no idea I was going to write a book that involved you, let alone was, you were the main character in the book. And I don't know until it left my head and mouth. You're asking me what I was thinking when I was writing this. I just sat down in some final moment after 10 years of professional and personal development and change and evolution and honesty. And I had reached a place where I was ready to get honest and be honest. And I was actually pushing myself harder than my conscious mind wanted me to go. And so what that means is when I started to write this book, I thought, I'll tell this story, and this story, which are kind of stories I had never told. But I didn't know I was going to tell that story, and that story until I got going. And then I was like, F it, I'm going to friggin' lay it all out there. And it's going to help somebody. Like that horrible, embarrassing story right there is going to help somebody. And so the book starts out with me having the awakening from your liar lid lecture in Philadelphia, and my acknowledgement driving away that I was a liar, and I think I was a good person then. I was operating with good intentions. I was a giver. I had won community contribution awards. I was a person that was giving back. I definitely was, somebody that was operating with good moral fiber, but not completely being honest with myself. And that's where that, revelation comes. Premonitions and reoccurring dreams. This chapter starts to talk, and this is where you could write something where people think you're crazy. I knew when I started to write the story, I had a number of things in this, and you haven't asked me yet, so I'm gonna stop here. You asked me what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. Why don't I stop here and let you ask whatever else you want about this next chapter?
Well, did you get challenging feedback around the idea of premonition? I think this is an amazing segue, and thanks for catching yourself in that, because ultimately I would have liked to listen to you for another 10 minutes, and I think the audience too, but there's even a lesson in that I want to unpack that I can relate to.
It's in my unlearning.
Yeah, well, I can relate to it too, and I believe the audience as well, whether they realize it or not. The idea of the premonition there. So I have a question. What is a premonition for those that don't know? I looked it up earlier.
Yeah. I don't know what the Wikipedia definition is, so maybe you should read that.
Yeah,
I don't know if that'll change my answer. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So I wrote premonition and reoccurring dreams. I don't, I believe I have the ability I have had scary daydreams that moments, hours later have come true. And vivid visualizations. And I don't know if it's some sort of, this sounds so crazy, and I cannot believe I'm saying it on this podcast. I don't know if it's some sort of time warp, whereas I'm catching up with something that's really actually already happened. I don't, like, there's a lag of some sort. How do I explain it? It's scary to me. It made me go to the doctor.
Well, Christine, I want to help you out. I want to add to this. I was reading a autobiography of George Soros. There's some varying views of the man, but the investor, a guy that brought back 40% a year for 2 decades, close to, he would talk about how if his back hurt, he would make decisions differently. There's a whole body of literature and around intuition, around speculation. The markets are moved. So it says here on the Google here, a strong feeling that something is about to happen, especially something unpleasant.
Yes.
Meaning throughout your career, because you're high level success in operationally, sales, leadership, how much of the success in your ability to move people, move markets, essentially, do you think came down to your intuition or a feeling or, what we could, so that's why I'm curious.
I would be lying if I said that my gut is 100%. But I have a strong intuition, and I have come to discover that literally I'm going to give it a number of 90% of the time it's accurate. I've had some scary coincidences. I've had dreams, literal dreams that recur, that are sending me some sort of message. I know you can pick up a dream book at any Hallmark store and it's going to define what you're psychologically thinking, or somebody's tried to tell the world what somebody's thinking. And I don't know if that's true or not. And I've never bought one of those books, by the way. I've kind of just sat with whatever I felt like the message might be. But my awake premonitions are the ones that are really the most incredibly accurate. My dreams are eclectic, but my conscious daydreams of things. And in the chapter, I talk about a baby that's crying, a baby I know, who's a daughter of a friend of mine. And the circumstances are weird because I'm finishing a consulting meeting, just to give the listeners a little taste of this chapter. I'm finishing a consulting meeting, and I usually have minutes between my consulting meetings, and that means get water, get coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever. And I didn't. I had 15 minutes, and I was walking from my desk where I had done the consulting through this area of my house where there was a couch, And for whatever reason, I just felt really heavy. I felt really like all of a sudden, like I was walking with 100-pound weight, like something had just washed over me. And I sat down on the couch. No rhyme or reason. I can't tell you why, because I'm always racing between my appointments. That never happens. And as I sat down, I drifted into a daydream immediately. Like I sat down and within seconds, I was visualizing this friends of mine, child, baby, like 1-year-old baby crying, really like horribly crying, like a scared cry. And I can see somebody cusping their hands and like looking, I can see a man peering at the baby. It came and it went within like 5 minutes. And then I didn't know why I was sitting on the couch, and I stood up and I went to go get my drink. But it stuck with me all day that this thing kind of happened. But I was busy and I went into all my appointments. Later that night, around 6 or 7, when my day ended and I was sitting in the living room, I told Corey about this daydream. And he said, don't tell our friends whose child this was. I said, I feel like I should tell them, like maybe the child's in danger, or maybe they should be paying attention in public places. Maybe the child's going to, like, something's going to happen, like someone's going to try to abduct her or something. And he goes, I'm telling you, you're going to sound crazy if you say this. But I just had a feeling like, why would I be given this unless I'm supposed to act on it? Like, I'm not supposed to like keep these to myself, I don't think. So I defied Corey's advice and I wrote a 3-way text to the mother and father. And within seconds, my phone rang. And they said, we're standing here together. I was on speakerphone. Our hair is standing on end. And we need to ask you some questions. I said, yeah, what? And they were like, well, this morning there was a confusion between the two of us about our daughter. And one of us thought the other one had her, and we both left for the day and left her in the house. And I said, what time was this? And they said, it was the same time. And the mailman found her, heard the baby crying, was looking through the window as it was delivering mail, trying to figure out why this baby was shrieking. They live 1,000 miles away from me. It made me so scared. We all were freaked out. We all have this shared moment. And in this chapter, I have other things like that have occurred. And I've had it happen twice since I wrote the book. And so I wish I could control it. Like, I wish I could sit here and say, like, tell me what's going on. What is Jay Doran doing right now in Philadelphia? And then, like, close my eyes and I can see what you're eating for dinner. But it doesn't work that way. I've discovered there's no rhyme or reason. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't, whatever the premonitions purpose was, it didn't work. But it makes me question how we are connected as people, what our minds are actually able to do electrically, sending messages to one another. Like, I don't know that we have it all figured out scientifically yet. It makes me think, and I'm sure everybody that has some sort of altruism or, I'm not a big fan of the people that go on TV and they're like, let me connect you to your loved one and let me tell you what they're thinking. And I think that's, because I know I can't control it, I guess I have this snobbiness around the idea that you can sit for television and channel somebody. I've recently had, I've never said this out loud before, but I've recently had the awareness that I think sometimes my sister comes to visit me and it isn't like an outside of her sitting here, like in the room. It's like inside of me. Like and again, it's like really weird to talk about, but like all of a sudden she had a really bad shoulder. She loved Diet Coke. I'm not a soda fan and I don't have a bad shoulder. And there's times when I feel so much of what her body was feeling before she died. Like, and I caught myself sitting with like a Diet Coke and my shoulder aching. And I'm like, what's happening? Like, is this a message, type of thing. So I don't know. I don't know what it means, but the chapter, I'll land it here because I'm sure everybody that's listening is going to think I'm crazy. This consumes 1/1000 of my mind and time. I wrote about it in one of the opening chapters because I really wanted everybody to understand and lay the groundwork in this book, that this book is about a mental, spiritual, and personal journey that I've been on my whole life, because some of these premonitions came when I was a child. I share one of my reoccurring dreams as like a little girl at like 6 or 7 years old. So I was aware, and I was asking my parents why. I was afraid to go to sleep because I kept having this scary dream 4 or 5 nights in a row. And I wanted an adult at that age to explain to me what was happening. I was afraid as a little girl to go to sleep to have the same dream again. I later realized there was something going on and I was feeling it, and I couldn't see it with my mom and dad, but I felt it and I knew it as a little girl, way before my intelligence had developed and my conscious awareness. And so I hope what that does for the reader is it pulls them in. It's a sensational chapter, and it's dramatic. Later in the book, I'll say I was born by a pack of drama wolves under a tree, and I'll put my family up against anybody with drama. That's true. I was trained by an Emmy Award winning drama queen. And so I will tell you that I think what this means is that if we really use our brains and the way they're intended to be used, if we listen to ourselves, I think I'm in tune with my inner ear at a greater level than most people. I think some people are deaf to their conscious awareness. This lays out the groundwork for change and evolution in our spirit and our ability to evolve as people, because if we don't know that our brain is our operating system, that we are driving and we are also being driven by, of course we are driven to lustful things. Of course, that's the groin operating. The brain has to tell us to stop or go against natural physical feelings. This is where I unpack these 3 operating systems. Our heart tells us, I'm in love with this guy that's no good for me. I love this guy. I like him. I don't know why I shouldn't like him. He's not a great guy, but I like this guy. I'm in love with this guy. Our brain says he's not good for you, but our heart says, but I love him. And we stay in bad situations because our brain can't overwrite what our heart is saying. And so in this chapter, I'm saying at some point in our lives, these 3 operating systems are totally embattled to one another. We shame ourselves later in life when we say we made mistakes. The truth is we didn't make mistakes. We acted upon a natural system that all of us have that had greater pull than our logical brain had. This book couldn't be written 20 years ago because I wasn't driving from my brain. I was driving from my crotch at one point. I was driving from my heart at some other point in my life. The mix of those 3 operating systems were driving collaboratively at some point, which probably made for a really nice, when I really had some of the highest parts of my career. Today, I'm aware of what my heart tells me. I'm aware of what my brain tells me. I'm aware of what my brain tells me. And there's no question at 53, my brain is in charge. Like my brain is telling me what I do with my business. I can do terribly difficult things that my heart tells me this is going to hurt. Like I'm going to hurt this person by saying this. This is going to hurt me. This person could leave me. My heart would say, don't do this, And my brain is so in control. I have guys that hit on me, that are good-looking guys, that are flattering to me every day. And I'm not saying that to flex. I'm saying that because if I wanted to find people to boost my ego and satisfy some sort of lustful feeling I have internally, I know that they're there. My brain won't even crack the door to that today. Like literally that person's knocking on the door and my brain's saying, go away. Like there's no peeking through the crack. Like, ooh, who's out here? There is zero interest. Like there is like, you've got your shit together, girl. You got a great guy. You've got all this stuff. Stay on course because we're going to take you to heights you've never been. So I hope my brain writes future books like this book has been written, because that's where I think I'm going to lay down my greatest work. Premonitions and Recurring Dreams is going to make the unconscious reader think about their consciousness. It's going to make them think about whether they're ignoring the messages that they have naturally telling them, I'm doing wrong. Because in order to do wrong, you have to ignore your consciousness. And here's the problem with that. People's consciousness can be 0 to 10 volume. And if it's a good solid 6 or 7, you've got to quiet it to do wrong. And in order to quiet it, you might drug it, you might drink it into submission, okay? But you can only ignore it so well sober. I believe we weaken our conscious awareness through alcohol, and I think that plays a huge role. These vices that we take on to trying to tell us we're working against our inner workings and wirings. So I'm here to say this is not hard work, guys. You just have to level up your internal consciousness. We're already equipped to do good. We're fighting against doing good. In fact, some of us think doing bad comes easy or natural. It doesn't. Doing bad is learned. Doing bad is unnatural. Now, I'm not going to argue, like people will sit here and say, well, what about a serial killer? What about a rapist? What about, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you how those people are malfunctioned. I'm assuming there is a major malfunction, psychologically speaking, that allows them to break through their consciousness to do heinous acts, right? Hideous acts, which lends to the idea that they're probably not what's the word? They're not able to be rehabilitated. They're probably wired in such a way, and you see it because they get let out 40 years after their first crime and recommit crimes. And so anyways, that's Premonitions and Reoccurring Dreams. It sets the table for the reader for the whole book, because once it's almost like when you go to a fancy restaurant and they bring you a palate cleaner and they say, eat this and drink this wine or whatever, because it's going to cleanse your mouth and open up your taste buds so that the next thing you eat, you can take in completely. I am cleansing the reader's mind here in this opening chapter to set the table for what they're about to consume in the rest of the book.
You said, I remember my dream. My father was standing in the doorway of a lit hallway. The bedroom was dark, so the images of my mother and father standing at either door were vivid. At one end, my father, and on the other, my mother, and they were playing tug of war with a rope.
Yeah. I go on to say that
What do
my
you think?
father's face, which is at the time and still today freckled and with hair, was plain and clear. And guys, this was in the 70s. So this was not before we had filters that made us look like clear-faced on pictures. But that was the filter I was seeing his image through in my dream, was this very, if you could imagine, a pale, all clear, no spots on his face. It was his face, but it was just pure and plain. My mother's face was burnt. The skin was burnt, almost like you'd see an evil figure or something. I hate to say that out loud, but it's true. And so this is the imaging of a 6 or 7-year-old girl. And this is a repeated dream. They're standing in 2 doorways. We lived in a trailer that had 2 bedrooms that were divided by a wall. The wall had been taken down, and now it was one big room, but it had 2 doors, one on either end. And when the hallway was lit and you were in the room dark, the 2 doorways were lit. And in my dream, they were standing, pulling on a rope back and forth. So I think that I understood. I would ask later in life. I asked then. I was trying to explain then, and they were, my parents kind of was like irritated that I was getting up in the middle of the night because of my dream. And they, I actually got scolded and told to go back to bed. And so I suffered through that time, kind of alone. I mean, suffered is a dramatic word. I went through this process of this until it stopped without really talking about it further. And it stuck with me for years and years and years. I mean, think of how many memories you have as a child that you can really remember now. The fact that I can even remember at 52 years old writing this book, this 6-year-old dream, it will tell you the level of vividness that that, and this epiphany point in my life of self-awareness. I was aware then there was a message. I didn't understand what the message was, and I wouldn't interpret that message until I was a teenager. And I circled back, and I was still searching for the answers. It was interesting. A decade later, at 15 or 16 years old, I said to my mom, I repeated this, and she got really mad at me because she's like, you've talked about this dream so many times in your life. Like, what the hell? And I said, well, what do you think was going on? What was happening? Like, were you and Dad fighting? And I kind of stunned her because she sat there hard, kind of thinking. And then she goes, we were going through something, but it's none of your business, she said, at 16. And I said, okay. And so I'm now aware that something big was going on with them. And I must have been hearing or feeling it in the household, even though I wasn't seeing it. They were very good, my mom and dad. I want to give them credit. I don't know if this is good or bad, because they hid their strife from us kids. I can remember hearing my mom crying through closed doors at times, not a lot. She wasn't a crier, but at the times that she always did it behind closed doors. And that speaks volumes to me of them not wanting to put their, parents need to shelter their children from, make them feel secure. And they always did. My mom and dad did an incredible job in a very tough set of circumstances as kids themselves. And so, that's that
chapter. They were under a lot of
lays,
pressure from their family.
I think they were just in the world alone. They had my older sister at 14 and 16, and my mom had been sent away because that's what happens when they're that age. And she returned 2 years later when my older sister was 2, and that's where they kind of reunite. And then I come a year later, they're still teenagers. And I think at this point they start their adult life as mid-teenagers, with nothing. And they both got jobs and they just work their way forward. And so, yeah, like I'm in their survival story. We're part of their survival story, because they go from, I had a front row seat to the nothingness that they had, and the struggle. And there's nothing embarrassing at all to tell, because you could not have found two people that had more tenacity when it came to setting regimens, keeping a clean house, putting food on the table, making us live with a set of morals. I mean, we were grounded if we lied, we were grounded if we mistreated other people. They were very strong in old school fiber that I would say, really installed. Those are the greatest gifts we can give people. In my, I could have had a house full of material things. And by the way, we never had a Christmas that missed, and we never went to school without new clothes. And they hit every mark. Every birthday was celebrated, and there wasn't extra, and we were aware of the lack, but I would tell you that probably lent to who I am today. If I didn't go through all of that, I wouldn't be here talking to you about writing my 5th best-selling book, which still right now this month is selling off the shelves like wildfire. I just got the Amazon royalty report yesterday, and it blows my mind every month how many people are buying this book.
What do you think is connecting with people?
I think the darkness part. I think there aren't a lot of figures in our industry. I don't think there's a lot of figures in life that submit themselves for intimate, emotional conversation. I think a lot of people are flexing on their professional success. And I've had plenty of that. And I started writing there in my life. Wise Eyes is a professional book with a few personal stories and feelings intertwined. But to get where I am now as a writer took leaps and bounds of, I wouldn't be here, and I can say this, and I don't need to kiss your ass, and I'm not an ass kisser, but I wouldn't be here on this podcast talking about it. I wouldn't have written this book, if I didn't stumble upon your lecture that night. I hope there's more than me that walked away that night changed from your liar lit, because you were emotional giving that lecture that night. It was hard to listen to for me, because I could feel your pain in a lot of the story. I could see where people might think you were a madman in some of the story, but that was relatable to me because it was like so brilliant in my mind that you were able to unpack this huge epiphany. I didn't know where it was going at some points. And when you landed, the layers of the liar lid, and you put, you had a PowerPoint and it was up on the screen, and I sat there looking at all the layers and I thought, fuck, I'm buried deep in that. I'm nowhere near the top of that cycle. So, and the rest of the story. I mean, I seek you out for further conversation. I mean, we had our day, that's our heyday now, our Fleming's steak dinners, where we just went down rabbit holes, holes of intellectual speak, which I talk about in the book. And, I'll say this to everybody listening, because I know this particular chapter is deep. They're not all this deep. If you have people in your world where you can sit in places and philosophize, and expand upon thoughts, this is where the real discovery of yourself and your evolution will occur. We joke about like Corey and Jagger and I visiting you and Jenna and them sitting in the hot tub in the think tank. Well, we call our masters, I don't know if you know, but we stole that, and we call our masters groups, which is our top students here that have been the longest and gone the farthest with their education and certification. We have something called the Masters Think Tank. And just like we love sitting in the think tank with you because we go into these deep philosophical conversations, the masters come together to mastermind. And it was yesterday here at my company. And I'm going to tell you something. It was one of the most heartwarming, absolutely mind-blowing places I sat all month. And to see these leaders with their sleeves rolled up from different divisions, brokers and lenders, bankers and retailers, all hurting, all in this grind of a tough industry we're in this year, all of them doing tough things and trying to put their own oxygen masks on, and coming together with gratitude and a good mindset, and helping each other find footholds and giving each other tips, and realizing also in the moment what a powerful room we were sitting in. And to think that this is where I left what I did to do this, all of this wouldn't be happening if I didn't understand what makes greatness and human people evolve and improve. My number one goal in life is to help every person that comes to sit at my table have some sort of self-discovery, whether that's a personal or professional change. Whatever you're paying for tuition at my company, I promise you, I'm going to get you a lifetime of ROI. It's going to go past your tuition. I have clients that have left me a year ago, and they write me long emails to this day, not here, thinking of me, thinking of the company, thinking of their own, telling me they're still using my lessons, telling me, as soon as they can afford to come back, type of thing, and feeling a sense of, longing. And I realized that's a really incredible power to take responsibility over. When you emotionally connect with people, if they, it was like leaving my last employer. I had so many of them call me when they were moving on from that employer years after I left.
Wow.
And on the heels of like tendering a resignation. And to think that they felt like they needed to tell me as one of their vital people tells me the depth of emotional connection I have with people that I work with and people that I'm around. So yeah. And that's a double-edged sword because I get hurt. I get hurt. People quit me, because I'm tough. I say tough things that are real, not to be tough, but when the hard thing needs to be said, I'm your girl. I'm going to tell you to face your shit today more than I ever have, just like you did with me. And I'm not doing it to hurt people. I'm doing it because the only chance they have and the only time they have is right now. If I think I can make somebody face an addiction or face a deficit that's hurting people around them, hurting them, I'll say it. because I truly believe people often need to hear it 20 times before they take change. Jagger is responsible for getting me to quit smoking, because I smoked for 32 years and that kid would tell me 10 times a week that he hated that I smoked. And he would say, and I don't know why, but he would just say it. And it just, I thought of him, and every time I had a cigarette, I would think of whether he's with me or not, I would think about how he hated it. And I just thought, what a wonderful example it would be if I could show him that I could quit a vice in front of him. That was hard. It would be a great life lesson to refer to as an adult. And I did. And it was with him in mind that I was able to go through that physical process, that and more, as a matter of fact.
When someone has that feeling, that hunch, that premonition, is your advice to lean into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should sit with whatever it is and think about why it's coming to you. It's not lost on me that my friends that found out that I had that awareness of the baby crying thing, that these two people have been in my life and played significant roles in my life. And that the message they got was I could tell what they were doing. And that was not my intent, but I think it freaked them out a little. Like, shit, she can see everything, or feel everything. And it changed my relationship with them. And I don't think in the way Corey thought, beware, they're going to think you're crazy. That's not what I saw. But I do think they thought she's powerfully intelligent. There's something at play there. And so I don't know. I think every person needs to have, you've got to level up your internal consciousness. If you right now, as you're listening to this podcast, have bad feelings over something you are doing or not doing, we all know when we tell the omitted lie. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you that I ate this hamburger when you weren't with me. I didn't lie, but I just didn't tell you I stopped to visit that friend that you don't like. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you that I stayed home sick from work today and laid in bed. Whatever those are little examples, but it can be big. It can be, I'm not happy with this marriage. I'm having an affair. And inside you're dying and you feel like I'm a liar and I'm hurting somebody, and you're not telling it because there's repercussions to be had if you do, and damages, and you don't do anything. And so I'm going to tell you that so here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not telling you go tell the truth in places that destroy people, because I had a psychologist tell me that's incredibly selfish. Us wanting to rid ourselves of guilt sometimes can be very damaging to other people and self-serving. And that doesn't mean, that's not a permission slip to continue lying. It's saying to you, how do you stop doing the thing that is devious and wrongdoing and hurtful, so that your consciousness is now aligned again to feeling self-love and honor, because you feel like you're doing the right thing. When you consciously change what you're doing to be good and honest, you might not have to say, I did that and cause damage to other people, because you've now corrected yourself. My point is that listen to what your body is telling you. We start to get sick, even mentally and physically, when we defy our wiring. I know it. And vices come in and all of those things. I don't know too many people that I look at all the guys I ran with that cheat on their wives. And I'll just say this, they're also drinkers and druggers. Very few of them are sober cheaters. So the whole thing is like a mixed bag of deceit and defiance. It doesn't matter to me, the justice of that. And what I mean is, do I care that their wives are being cheated on? I guess I do. I never like to see anyone get hurt. My point is they are defying their own self-love. They can't reach their most confident level. That guy can't lead well. First of all, he can't lead well because he's setting a poor example. So moral people are going to look at that guy and say, I don't want to follow that guy because he's not an honest man. It actually seeps into your brain in every transaction you do that person sitting with you is a liar. And so leadership has to be moral and integral, good leaders, powerful leaders. Right now, powerful leadership in our industry is needed. We've got to march people up a freaking hill. And you can only do that. People ask me all the time, how did you get great results? And I think for the most part of my career, I was an integral, honest to goodness leader. And people trusted me explicitly. And you can only get that person to lay it all on the field when they're in the mindset of that. And so if you want to achieve greatness, and I think greatness is a mindset, when you feel like you're at your greatest, like I posted this morning, I'm not embarrassed to say, I have a 1-year goal of physical fitness for myself. And it has specific weight loss and specific change to my diet. And I'm hoping my body also responds because I'm doing bodybuilding, weightlifting. I'm at the halfway point. So I had a photograph done this week, a professional photograph. I only put up one. There's many that are coming. I'm 54 years old on November 4th. I think it's really good for me to set an example to the world that I'm willing and still trying to get out there and change myself, to evolve, to reach my limits, to extend my limits, to do difficult things, to show self-discipline. And I think that's good for me to be the teacher of that and to show that I feel good about it. And I do more when I set goals, and I do more when I publicly, which I say in the Blueprint for Success, set these goals. I'm at the halfway point. Stay tuned. Let's see where I am in 6 months. But I'm climbing this mountain right now. And so I guess I'll end by just saying I'm dedicating my life at this part to see how I can perpetuate the evolution of betterment in other people's lives, using myself in my darkest spots as the examples.